Victor was kicked out of the conference, unaware he was the main sponsor. Instead of leaving, he chose to teach a system still holding on to racism a lesson. His next move shocked even the most seasoned observers. Victor stepped into the lavish conference hall, his stride confident but inwardly tense. His custom-tailored suit fit flawlessly, but it couldn't mask the unease he felt. As a successful black businessman, he had often encountered prejudice despite his achievements and status. Today, he was the main sponsor of this prestigious event, yet rather than feeling a sense of belonging, he immediately noticed the icy stares from those around him. Each look pierced him, not acknowledging his success or influence, but focusing solely on the color of his skin. Victor's gaze drifted over the luxurious surroundings, marble floors, glass chandeliers sparkling under soft light. Everything symbolized status and wealth. He should have felt at home here, but something felt off. Approaching the reception desk, invitation in hand, he leaned in to introduce himself. "Hello, I'm Victor," he began, offering his invitation. The receptionist didn't bother to raise her head, giving him a quick, almost irritated glance. Barely hiding her disdain, she waved dismissively. "Are you sure you're supposed to be here?" Her tone was pointedly cold, her eyes scanning him with blatant hostility. Victor tensed but maintained his composure. "Yes, of course I am." He started to explain, but was abruptly interrupted by the sound of heavy footsteps approaching. Two large security guards in black suits came up to the desk with stern expressions, seemingly having already decided that Victor was some kind of intruder. One guard placed a hand on his belt where a radio hung, his movement menacing. "You'll need to leave, sir," the guard said coldly, his gaze leaving no room for argument. Victor's heart sank from the sudden blow. He could feel his pulse pounding in his temples. "There's been a mistake," he began, his voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and anger. "I'm Victor, the main sponsor. We don't care who you are." The second guard cut him off with open contempt. "This is a private event. If you don't leave, we'll escort you out ourselves." The "we don't care who you are" hit Victor like a lightning bolt. They didn't know who he was, and worse, they didn't care. His achievements and importance to this event meant nothing to them. They saw only a black man, someone they believed had no place among the elite. Before Victor could clarify, the guards grabbed him by the arms, ignoring his protests. Their grip was firm, cold, and unfeeling. A wave of helplessness washed over him as they marched him through the lavish hall toward the exit, treating him like an unwelcome guest who didn't belong. The doors slammed shut behind him. Victor stood outside, the sting of humiliation gripping him. The world felt heavier, and his heart ached with the injustice of it all. In that moment, he realized that despite his success, wealth, and status, he was still facing the brutal reality of a biased society that refused to see past his skin color and recognize his true accomplishments. Standing outside, Victor felt a storm of rage and pain rising within him. Each heartbeat pulsed with humiliation, while the stares of passers-by seemed to bore into his back. Some looked at him with pity, others passed by indifferently, but none of them saw him as a successful man or the sponsor of the event. They saw only a black man who had just been thrown out of a building. The suit that had once filled him with confidence now felt like a suffocating reminder that his appearance overshadowed his achievements. His breathing became ragged, and Victor knew he had to act to keep this moment from breaking him. He pulled out his phone, his hands slightly trembling, not from fear, but from the anger boiling inside. As he scrolled through his contacts, memories flashed before his eyes. Times when he had been underestimated solely because of his skin color. Restaurants, business meetings, airports. Each time the same thing. People immediately judged him based on his appearance, not who he really was. And today was no different. He had thought he was used to it, but every new instance cut deeper than the last. He stopped at his assistant's name and hit call with a sharp press. "Get in touch with the organizer immediately," Victor said through gritted teeth, trying to suppress the emotions threatening to burst out. "Now!" The phone felt heavier than usual as he brought it to his ear, waiting for the response. Each second of silence stretched into minutes, and his mind returned to the countless times he had had to fight for the right to be heard and recognized. Time and again, people had only seen the color of his skin, failing to understand that they were standing in front of someone who had reached incredible heights. Today was just another link in a long chain of disappointments. But today was the last time he was willing to tolerate it. Finally, the organizer's voice came through, frantic and barely keeping it together. "Victor, I'm so sorry. This is a terrible mistake. Please come back. I'll fix everything." The words tumbled out quickly, almost like a plea, and Victor felt his jaw tighten. A mistake? How could they so casually dismiss everything as a mistake? He didn't need apologies if nothing was going to change. Those people, the guards, the receptionist, didn't see him as a person, didn't see his achievements. They were just acting on their prejudices. His respect for them was gone. A mistake? Victor's voice was low but firm. "I won't return for an empty apology. I want everyone involved in this fired." His words were a command. He wasn't going to explain himself, tolerate it, or accept superficial apologies. Victor made it clear that he would not be treated like someone insignificant. This day was about to become a turning point, where those who were used to seeing him as a stereotype would finally understand who he truly was. A man who controlled the situation, not a victim of their biases. Inside the conference hall, the atmosphere remained lively, though the guests were unaware of what had just happened. The event organizer, a middle-aged woman with perfectly styled hair and a strict business suit, stormed toward the security guards with a face contorted in anger. Her eyes blazed, her voice shaking with outrage, no longer trying to contain herself. "Do you realize who you just threw out?" Her voice cut through the air sharply, catching the attention of some nearby guests. The guards, who had appeared calm and self-assured moments ago, now looked confused. Their confidence vanished under the organizer's furious glare, as if her anger alone could destroy their careers. "He's the main sponsor of the entire conference!" she shouted, her voice rising with every word, as if each sentence was a hammer blow, smashing the remnants of their arrogance. The guards froze as the weight of their mistake finally hit them. Their faces went pale, glancing at each other as the magnitude of what they had done sank in. The realization that they had just ejected the most important guest, the one funding the event, struck like a thunderbolt. Shock and fear were written all over their faces. They hadn't even understood how their prejudice had led to this disaster. Meanwhile, Emma, the lead public relations specialist, stood nearby, watching the scene with a worried expression. She didn't need anyone to explain what had happened. She had been in this business for a long time and knew Victor personally as one of the event's key sponsors. His contributions to the conference were substantial, and his absence now threatened to bring catastrophic consequences, not just financially, but reputationally as well. Emma knew there was no time to waste. She made a quick decision and, without a word, rushed out of the building, heading for the exit where she believed Victor might still be. The sky was already darkening as she ran outside, streetlights casting a soft glow on the street in front of the building. Victor stood under one of the lamps, his tall figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. He was waiting for a car, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. Even in such a situation, he looked impeccable, but the cold silence around him spoke of deep disappointment and anger. Out of breath, Emma hurried toward him, trying not to seem too flustered but failing. She knew that every second counted. "Victor, please," she said, trying to keep her voice calm, though there was a hint of desperation in it. "You have every right to be upset, but we need you inside. Let me fix this." She studied his face, hoping to see any sign of softening. Victor stared at her for a long moment, his gaze cold and unblinking. Time seemed to slow, and the silence between them grew heavy. She knew that much more than their professional reputation was at stake. Their relationship with him as a key partner hung in the balance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Victor raised an eyebrow slightly and spoke in a quiet but firm voice. "You have one chance." His words were an order. He made it clear that no more mistakes would be tolerated. Emma felt a wave of relief, but also a heavy sense of responsibility, understanding that the situation was now entirely in her hands. As Victor crossed the threshold of the conference hall once more, the organizer and a group of staff followed him closely, their faces tense, beads of sweat forming on their brows. Fear of what might unfold in the next few minutes gripped them. Each step Victor took echoed in their hearts, signaling the potential for a scandal that could not only damage their reputations, but jeopardize the entire conference. They knew that everything now hinged on how Victor would respond and what he chose to say. Inside, the guests continued to enjoy the luxurious atmosphere, chatting and indulging in the buffet. None of them had any idea what had transpired just outside, but as Victor walked into the room, the atmosphere changed in an instant. It was as though an invisible wave had swept through the room, and people started to notice his presence. Conversations quieted, and people began to glance his way, their eyes filled with curiosity. Victor moved with confidence, his posture and expression, showing that he was a man who was in control of the situation. The security guards at the entrance, who had turned pale at the sight of him, now stood frozen in fear. They already understood that their careers were hanging by a thread. Their faces were masks of fear, and they seemed to be trying to blend into the background, as though hoping to become invisible. Without a glance in their direction, Victor calmly made his way to the stage. A spotlight illuminated his figure, giving him an even more commanding presence. At that moment, the entire room fell silent, every eye on him. Now, they saw not just a black man, someone who many might have unconsciously underestimated, but a powerful, influential person who had every right to be there more than anyone else. The room's energy shifted completely. It was now filled with tension and anticipation. Victor paused on the stage, surveying the room before he began to speak. His voice was calm, but every word carried authority and conviction. "The events of this evening," he began, pausing for effect, "show that we still have a long way to go. I sponsor events like this, not only to promote innovation, but to break down barriers." The room was silent, everyone hanging on his every word. "Let tonight be a catalyst for real change," he continued, his voice resonating like a bell, filling the room. "I expect accountability from the organizers and lessons to be learned by every participant." His final words hung in the air like a lightning strike. He didn't blame anyone directly, but everyone knew this was more than a statement. It was a call to action, a call for the change that had to start now. When he finished, the room erupted in applause. But it wasn't the kind of applause filled with ease. It was tinged with admiration and guilt. People understood that they had just witnessed something significant, a moment that had the potential to change, not just this evening, but much more in the future. The security guards were immediately fired. The organizers rushed to take steps to prevent further problems. And Victor, having finished his speech, left his mark, not just as a businessman or a sponsor, but as someone who could overcome any obstacle and force the world to see his true strength. He walked away with his head held high, proving to himself and others that he could not be broken. That evening became yet another testament to his unbreakable spirit, showing that he would always rise above any challenges and force the world to see him for who he truly was, invincible.